The Toronto Raptors make an epic 25-point comeback versus defending champs, but they can't close the deal. Let's talk about it.
This is the Raptors Postcast, your instant game reaction for the Toronto Raptors. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this episode of the Raptors Postcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, coming to you live after the Raptors 116-107 loss against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Locked On Raptors is now part of the #1 sports podcast network, covering your team every day on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Locked On podcast feed. I'm Zulfi Sheikh, credentialed journalist covering the Raptors and the NBA for over 2 seasons now with outlets like the Raptors, with Raptors Republic and Sportsnet. And now I'm one of your humble hosts of the Raptors Postcast, breaking out each and every game with you. And usually with me is Dwayne Notice, aka Dino, but our professional basketball player and analyst had a game on the road, so I'll be taking care of this solo. So thank you for tuning in with me. And on tonight's show, we're going to be talking about how the Raptors almost completed a miraculous comeback, but fell just short against the Oklahoma City Thunder. We'll break down some more struggles against another top 10 team. We'll get some thoughts on a segment we like to call Take Notice, and then we'll wrap things up by handing out our player of the game. And truthfully, the tone of this recap was going to be fairly negative had the fourth quarter not started how it did for the Raptors. After leading by as many as 10 points early on, Toronto forced 7 turnovers for 10 points against the Oklahoma City Thunder. They had a lot of momentum thanks to their defense and then the effort of a guy like RJ Barrett, who had 11 points in the first quarter. The Raptors summarily got dismantled by the shorthanded Thunder in the second and third quarters, losing those 2 quarters by a combined 25 points. The champs, even without SGA and J-Dub, just bullied the Raptors and stole all the momentum. Cason Wallace was awesome in this game. He led the way with 27 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists. He kind of had his way with the Raptors. It was honestly an all-star caliber performance. But a lot of that changed in the fourth quarter between at the end of the third and the start of the fourth, when the Raptors basically went on a 27-3 run. The Thunder started the fourth quarter shooting 1 of 15 and scoring just 3 points through the first 7 minutes. That defense we saw from the Raptors early on came back for them. They were able to get stops. They're able to get good opportunities for them in transition and create good looks for themselves, hit some timely shots. But ultimately, the Raptors did run out of gas. After Jamal Shead tied the game on a 3, the Raptors got a little sloppy. They committed 3 consecutive turnovers. And then Scottie Barnes, who had been fantastic in that fourth quarter and for a lot of this game, when he left with a leg injury, Oklahoma took advantage for those possessions that Scottie sat. Now, he did come back into the game and try to tough it out, but the Thunder were able to get some big baskets from Cason Wallace and Lu Dort down the stretch, and that was essentially enough to close that game out for them. And it's interesting because this was another example of the Raptors when you look at them against a top 10 team where they came up short. The Raptors are now 4-14 against top 10 teams in the NBA. And if you look at them against the top 6 of the NBA, they're even worse. They're now 1-10. But what was different in this one for them, if you want to look at a silver lining in the loss, is that they did have somewhat of a response. The common theme for them throughout these losses against top 10 teams in the NBA has been that of they start strong, but once they get punched in the mouth, they don't necessarily have a response. Like when teams that are good adjust, and a lot of them do, that's why they're good, can the Raptors kind of attack them with a different wrinkle? You see it against the Thunder early on in this game. The Raptors forced a lot of turnovers, 7 in the first quarter. This other team only commits around 12 to 13 turnovers a game, the second fewest in the NBA. So when the Raptors are able to do that on them and get easy looks, that's great. But when the Thunder settle things down, they adjust. They're not letting a guy like Alex Caruso bring the ball up as much. Scottie Barnes stripped him twice in a row on back-to-back possessions in that first quarter. They said, okay, enough of that. Let's let a guy like Cason Wallace do more of the ball handling. The Thunder adjusted. The Raptors only forced 1 turnover in the second quarter. And what happened? They lose that quarter by 16 points because they're not able to generate easy offense that way. They only scored 19 points in the quarter. And then all of a sudden, OKC is off to the races. You saw it against the Knicks or the Timberwolves in previous games before the All-Star break, where the Raptors start off strong, but once the other team is able to adjust and take away that strength, they don't really have a counter in most cases. Now, in a lot of this game, they didn't. But that fourth quarter, I'm hoping, is something you can look at as a building block for this team because they relied on their strengths defensively. Their leaders in, again, a guy like Scottie Barnes was able to make some massive plays, whether it was his block on Chet Holmgren or just his stops along the way. And you had other guys filling in, letting the defense kind of take charge of how they were able to get back in that fourth quarter. It wasn't necessarily they were just hitting an abundance of shots. Yes, you had that really big three by Jamal Shed, but their defense is what got them back into this game, and it's what also had them leading early on in this game as well. So that's one of those things where I tend to look at that as hopefully a building block for the Raptors. I'm not going to chuck this into that same category as the last couple of losses they had against top teams in the NBA, where once they got punched in the mouth, they kind of folded. This felt like there was a bit of a response. There was a bit of a comeback, because if you look at the second and third quarters, quite honestly, we could have come out of this game saying the Raptors embarrassed themselves. This is a team that was missing its two best ball handlers, that is also going to be playing on a back-to-back tomorrow, and they could have taken this game easily. But then they stepped up with guys like Cason Wallace and Lou Dort, and Isaiah Joe, I believe, had 22 points for them as well. Those guys all stepped up for the Thunder. And the Raptors, again, could have folded when they got summarily outplayed through those first, for the second and third quarters. But they had a response, and that's something we haven't necessarily seen from them against top teams in the NBA. And that's going to be important in this closing stretch, because 4 of their next 6 games are against top 10 teams. 3 of those games are technically against top 6 teams, when the Raptors, like I said, are 1-9 against those. 1-10 against those teams. And now they have a couple of those games at home as well. There's a game coming up against the New York Knicks that, if I'm the Raptors, I have that game circled. It's at home. The Knicks have embarrassed you in 3 games now when you've played against them, and you have not been as good at home. You have not been as good against top 10 teams in the NBA. So it's something I'm keeping an eye on. Can you respond? Can you come out with a bit of a statement performance against that New York Knicks team and show that you do belong in the upper echelon of the Eastern Conference, at least in that top 3 to 5 mix? Right now, the Raptors would be playing the Cleveland Cavaliers in the first round of the playoffs. And this is a new look Cavaliers team. The Raptors had beat them in the season series. They swept them, yes, but those were an injured Cavs team. That was a Cavs team without James Harden, Dennis Schroeder, or Keon Ellis. So you're going to be facing a team that looks very different than you saw before if you have to face them. And you're going to be facing a team that's going to be able to adjust, because they have veteran savvy and experience in guys like Harden and Schroeder, along with Donovan Mitchell. The Raptors so far, for a lot of the season against these top teams, they've shown the telltale signs of an inexperienced and young group. When they let leads go away, when good teams punch back, they kind of cower, and they haven't had an answer for them. So for them to have the type of performance they had in this game, where, yes, you got outplayed for a lot of the middle quarters, but in the fourth quarter, that start to it, I think there was an impact and emphasis on your defense there that I feel like if the Raptors can hone in on that, there is something to take from this loss more than the fact that your comeback felt just short. So that's where I'm hoping it's a bit of a building block performance for them. And you got quality performances even within the loss. Again, Scottie Barnes, I felt like for a lot of this game was special. He finishes with 15 points, 7 stocks. He has more stocks this season, more multi-stock games, I believe. This is his 9th game with 6+ stocks this season. That's more than he had in the last 3 seasons combined. You have a good game from RJ Barrett, his first quality performance since returning from injury. Obviously, it had been kind of rusty. Like I mentioned, he had 11 points in the first quarter. He finishes with 21 points on 8 of 15 shooting, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. This looked maybe the most we'd seen RJ Barrett look like himself. He had a bit more burst. He was scoring the transition early on as well. Jacoby Walter was also fantastic in this game. 17 points, 6 of 9 shooting. He hits 5 threes. He was basically their only punch of scoring off the bench, aside from Jamal Shed, who kind of got it going late and, again, hit that big 3. So you had some quality performance out of this, and I don't want to dismiss the fact that the Raptors did lose a game where they were leading by as many as 10 points at one point. But this is a championship OKC team for a reason. They have an abundance of quality players, and it's almost like a spoil of riches, or whatever the phrase is. They have a lot of depth to offer. So even without SGA and J-Dub, they get guys like Cason Wallace stepping up, Isaiah Joe. Lou Dort has just been a constant for them all season, and they still obviously have a guy like Chet Holmgren, who the Raptors honestly did quite a decent job against. Scottie Barnes obviously was matching up with Chet a lot, held him to 7 points on 3 of 8 shooting, but then you get 5 other guys going off for over 15 points. So this is one of those things where, like, if I'm the Raptors, I do look at it as like you left some meat on the bone here in the performance that you had, but the way you closed, that's what you need to focus on. Forget the second quarter, forget the third quarter. It's that fourth quarter and how you were able to make this OKC team that is a top 10 offense go 1 of 15 at one point. I think that's what you have to kind of try to take from this as much as possible. And hopefully if the Raptors can do that, they can show it against some of these top matchups coming up. Again, they face the Spurs, the very next day. They face the Spurs tomorrow, second night of a back-to-back. They're going to face the Knicks. They're going to face the Rockets, the Timberwolves again. These are, again, quality opponents. And if you're going to show that you can match up against these teams, I think it all just comes down to, can the Raptors keep up defensively? And in this game, they showed the capabilities that they can in spurts. Now it comes down to, can they sustain it? On the broadcast, Jack Armstrong kept saying it, like, can the Raptors sustain this kind of effort? That's the difference between championship quality teams and teams that are still figuring it out. And the Raptors have been kind of stuck in the middle of that these last couple of games. And hopefully you can see them do it, because you see them do it against not great teams. They did it against the Bulls, where they were able to take the Bulls' best punch after Chicago hit a couple threes in the fourth quarter. It was Jacoby Walter hitting a big shot. It was Colin Murray Boyles with the and one late, and Brandon Ingram with the dagger. When the Milwaukee Bucks made that run and they were able to cut what was a double-digit lead down to 3 points, the Raptors go double point guard, Amanda Quickly and Jamal Shed orchestrate a 10-0 run. The Raptors blow the Bucks out from there. They have the ability to respond, but tonight you didn't have that on the offensive side. You got it defensively late. Now, how can you do that against a quality team that you know is going to be able to punch back with you constantly? And that's something you're going to have to figure out with the Raptors, and we'll see. But for the most part, I think this was a bit of a weird outcome for Toronto, because they had the positive start and the positive ending. Just the middle quarters didn't work out for them. But we'll have to see how it goes moving forward. But when we come back after the break, I'm going to talk about what I noticed in this game and the guard hierarchy. And it was interesting to see the players who came off the bench first and what they're able to do for the Raptors. And we're going to talk about that as we continue this episode of the Raptors Postcast. All right, this episode is brought to you by Indeed. Let's talk about workplace chaos. Deadlines stacking up, inboxes overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, that is a task for Indeed sponsored jobs. It helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, whether that's skills, experience, or location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates. And there's less stress in that process, less time, and more results. And listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. If you need a hire, that's a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And lastly, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person, FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right, flights, tickets, the whole experience. And if you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is a perfect time to lock in. I love futures this time of year. And again, if you're looking at that defensive player of the year and who you want to be putting some money on, Scottie Barnes, 7 stocks tonight. This was a masterclass defensive performance for him. Going to go a very long way for his case to hopefully be in all defense and defensive player of the year conversations. But whether it's picking a player to win an award or picking a team to win a championship or grab a conference title, it adds an extra layer of excitement every game down the stretch of the season. And now not only can your pick cash in, but it can also send you to the finals. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, as we continue this episode of the Raptors Postcast, be sure to check out Sean Woodley with Locked On Raptors in the morning to get more in-depth analysis of the Raptors' loss to the Oklahoma City Thunder 116-107. All right, something I wanted to point out in the Take Notice segment here. Obviously, we don't have our resident pro, so I am doing my best to put on my player hat, if you will, and see if there's anything interesting or worth noting. And something I saw and I took notice of was the Raptors bench rotation in this game, specifically how Jacoby Walter and Jamison Battle subbed in first off the bench before Grady Dick. And I think it speaks to the Raptors getting to this point where they're just looking for scoring juice and production off the bench. Obviously, Grady Dick has struggled for much of the season. He came into this game shooting 1 of 9 since the All-Star break. He's shooting 31% from three on the season as it is. Now, he had moments in this game where he played good within the team context defensively. Again, especially in that first quarter, he was able to help on the strong side for a steal. He even helped Mamu on a drive to get a block. But overall, if you look at this game, Grady only gets in for 5 minutes. He doesn't even attempt a shot, and he finishes -6. Whereas a guy like Jacoby Walter, who has very much usurped him in the rotation here, he scores 17 points, the most points for this team off the bench. It was tied for the second most team points by any Raptor tonight with Emmanuel Quickly. And he makes 5 threes. He's hitting the shots that he needs to. He's being as pesky as he can defensively now. He didn't have the best of time against Cason Wallace, but Cason Wallace, again, has been doing that against a lot of people so far these last couple of games. But I think he offers more for you on the defensive end. Offensively, when he can be crafty and hitting those shots and simplify his game, because he's not a guy you really want dribbling the ball too much and getting inside, it's adding value for this Raptors team that needs that kind of three-point shooting and quite honestly needs that kind of scoring off the bench. They don't really get it anywhere else unless Mom was able to hit some shots. Jamal Shed had a decent night tonight off the bench with 13 points, but he's not a guy who's consistently giving you offense outside of playmaking off the bench. Jamison Battle comes in this game. He only scores 2 points, 1 of 3 shooting. Again, he had a couple moments where he had some effort and hustle on the glass and whatnot, but he's not a guy that the Raptors have necessarily gotten consistent offense from. So it's interesting to see that because, like, again, mentioned on the broadcast, they were talking about how, like, it gets to a point where this is a production-based league, and the Raptors are needing good quality production off the bench. And Grady Dick is kind of being seen as the odd man out right now. Now, that can change very quickly. Grady Dick is a guy that can catch fire. We've seen it in the past. But right now, Jacoby Walter has very firmly taken grasp of the bench guard role, if you want to call it that. And Grady Dick is a guy who's going to have to fight his way back into this rotation. And this game was indicative of that. So we'll have to see how the rotation kind of shakes out moving forward. But it's one of those things where honestly it's gonna come down to who can make more shots for you off the bench. And right now, Grady Dick isn't, and Jacoby Walter is 5 of 7 from 3. You take that any day of the week, and that was positive to see from Jacoby Walter. Another thing that was positive to see was our player of the game, and we're gonna hand that out now before we wrap things up.
This is the Locked On Player of the Game.
All right, our player of the game. Now, you can look at this a couple different ways. Again, RJ Barrett finishes with a team-high 21 points on 8 of 15 shooting. He makes 4 of his 6 threes. Generally positive. Again, I believe this was RJ Barrett's best game, essentially, since he came back from injury. The most burst he had, the most confident he looked in his decision-making. A guy like Brandon Ingram doesn't have the best night, but he still finishes with 15.6 rebounds, 6 assists. He was quite honestly in the torture chamber for a lot of this game. Lou Dort made life pretty damn difficult for Brandon Ingram, and OKC has so many lengthy defenders that even when he switched on to other guys or he was trying to make drives off Lou Dort, multiple bodies were coming his way, making it difficult for him to catch and do things in between. And then you have a guy, again, like I said, Emmanuel Quickly or Jacoby Walter, who had 17 points off the bench. Quickly also had 17, but it's hard not to look at Scottie Barnes and the impact he had in this game, especially down the stretch, and not give him the player of the game here. Yes, he finishes with 15 points, 7 assists, 3 rebounds, but he has 3 steals and 4 blocks. And down the stretch of this game, he basically essentially started that fourth quarter stretch for the Raptors, where Jacoby Walter gets a steal and Scottie Barnes is able to take the ball and score the other way. Later, he blocks Chet Holmgren, pushes the ball ahead, and Emmanuel Quickly is able to score a 3-pointer off that possession. It's a 7-0 run for the Raptors at that point. And Scottie Barnes had so many little moments and plays like those throughout this game that kept the Raptors afloat. And if Scottie Barnes had not sat in this game, the Raptors would have won based on the numbers, because in his 32 minutes out there, the Raptors were plus 18. They were at one point minus 25 when he was off the floor. And when he left that game in the fourth quarter for a couple of possessions, when he was dealing with a leg injury, it looked like maybe a thigh contusion. We'll have to see more of an update on that. I believe he's currently already been listed as questionable for the game against the Spurs. We'll see if hopefully we get an update on that. But when he left for those couple of possessions, what happened to the Raptors? Their offense and defense fell apart. They commit 3 turnovers. They let OKC go on a 9-0 run the other way, and that was essentially enough for the Thunder to stay ahead and take care of business and win this game. He comes back in the game. They try to make a couple moments. I think he was able to get a 3 towards the end there, but it was a bit too little too late for them. So Scottie Barnes, he's an all-star for a reason. Even though he shoots 7 of 17 from the field, he goes 0 of 3 from downtown. He only makes 1 free throw in this game. He only attempts 1. his impact is just so undeniable. And in a loss, he comes out again, a 9-point loss to be a plus 18. I know plus minus isn't an end all be all metric and you shouldn't look at it that way, but it speaks to how this guy is just winning his minutes when he's on the floor so often. And the Raptors very much did win his minutes tonight. It was just unfortunate when he sat. They didn't really have anybody to carry the load like he was. And it's one of those things where you kind of have to see moving forward what it's going to be like. If you look at the playoffs, I don't think Scottie Barnes is going to be sitting that much. I don't think he's going to be only playing 32 minutes. It's one of those things where you're not going to have many other options because you don't have somebody who replicates or gives you a facsimile of what Scottie Barnes does, especially on both ends of the floor. So for that reason, I'm going to give Scottie Barnes the player of the game. But before we wrap things up, just my final thoughts. Again, this was a weird loss because for most of it, you come out it wanting to say you were going to be disappointed. The Raptors weren't able to take advantage of a strong start against a shorthanded OKC team. The Thunder were able to make play after play in the second and third quarter. Quite honestly, at times, embarrassing the Raptors. There was a point in the third quarter where the Thunder converted on back-to-back, not back-to-back, but two separate 4-point plays. They were punking the Raptors for a lot of this game. Even in the end, if you look at some of the numbers, in the paint, the Thunder win 56-38. On second chance points, they are +3. On fast break points, they dominate the Raptors 15-6. And like you look at all those and you think the Raptors should come out of this feeling pretty sorry about their effort. But that fourth quarter is what you have to focus on. Again, especially early for the Raptors to be able to win that quarter by 9 points, for them to, again, at one point have held OKC to just 3 points for the first 7 minutes of that quarter. It speaks to their upside and potential there. It speaks to what they can do with Scottie Barnes as a defensive anchor. And if they can hone that and, like Jack Armstrong said on the broadcast, sustain it, then you come out of it feeling pretty damn good if they can get that kind of like effort consistently, or at least draw that out of this loss going forward. So we'll have to see if they're able to do that. Again, they have very little time to figure that out because they're going to be on the second night of a back-to-back against Victor Wembanyama, who I'm sure was watching this game and drooling, thinking about what he can do against this Raptors team defensively and how he can disrupt their half-court offense. We saw what he was able to do against the Detroit Pistons and their half-court offense. So you're going to assume he's going to want to do the same stuff against the Raptors, but we're going to see that soon. But for today, that does it for me, for myself, Zulfi Sheikh, and obviously Dwayne Notice, who's not here. Thank you to everyone who tuned in live and for those listening the morning after. If you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe to Locked On Raptors on all platforms. Don't forget to comment below if you have any thoughts on the Raptors 116-107 loss. But we will be back tomorrow on Wednesday. That's right. Dwayne Notice will be back with me live after the Raptors host Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs. So we will see you then, breaking it all down on the Raptors Postcast. Peace.